G'day, John.
Hey Trevor, how's it going there?
Good, mate. Good.
I've got to find the bloody record button. Oh, it's
I
recording already. I don't need to do anything.
was
It's
going to
already
say
happening.
it popped up the recording.
How you going?
Mate, I'm good. I went to bed before midnight for the first time in God knows how long and woke up too early. So that's good for my body. Normally I'm like 1, 2 o'clock. I was in bed by 11 last night. I threw my body clock out. But other than that, I'm good, mate. Really good.
I want to start out by just talking about this physical transformation you've had recently, because you and me met in person last year, and you're a slimmer, sharper, very dynamic looking man these days. So what did you do?
Thanks, mate. I mean, I'd started before that. Before we met in May, I sort of really got serious about the beginning of November. But I mean, I just did a big post about it just to see if it inspires anybody else to, get off their ass. Um, I'd started things over the years. As you get older, it's easy. You put weight on, you're drinking like a fish, and I would just stop. And I made the decision after looking at my fat fucking self in an elevator in Vegas in September that enough was enough. So I had to make the right decision. I've already made a decision now that I was just accepting how I was. And I knew I had another event in Vegas, speaking event and a wedding, marrying my friends in Costa Rica on Halloween. So I was like, all right, well, I'd started my intermittent fasting, but I got serious as soon as I got back, which
Mhm.
was the 5th of November. And, many people might try keto or various types of, carnivore diets, whatever. For me, intermittent fasting works best for me. What works good for me may not work for you or somebody else. But I find it good because I'm never hungry and because I was never really a breakfast person. As long as I get my 3 or 4 cups of black coffee in the morning, I was generally good to go. And sometimes we're like, holy shit, yeah, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I better eat. So it wasn't such a big issue for me. And then I just did initially 18-6. So for those who don't know, 18 hours of intermittent fasting, which is just water, black
Mhm.
coffee, black tea, nothing else. You can have like a soda, club soda with dash of lime or whatever in it, but anything else just breaks it. And then I'd eat over that initial 6 hour period, more OMAD, one meal a day. And then I just set the goal to walk 10 kilometers a day. Sometimes that would be all in one hit. Other times it's just, bit here and a bit there. And when I lived in Panama City, like, I mean, it's as hot as what it is here on the Caribbean side of Panama. But if it'll be raining or whatever, I would just go to the mall and I would do laps in the mall and get my 10K in, right? Because I sort of knew if I did this floor, did this up every corner back, I started to work out the the course basically. And there were times when things would stop. I'm traveling or like events on and stuff like that. It's much harder to do. But it was very easy to get back into it afterwards because it had become a lifestyle change. And so, I traveled a little bit last year. I traveled 5 months over three different trips. The second one was when you came to an event in Poland, and the biggest one was about 2.5 months roughly between speaking at Drayton's last event mid-July, speaking at an event in uh, Thailand after, which is the 7-day event. Then I just had a bit of a holiday in Thailand, then went to Italy for a friend's wedding. So I was away a long time. And, I'm back in Italy. I'm eating pastas. I'm eating pizzas. I'm drinking beer. I'm drinking wine. Generally still one meal a day or, intermittent fasting. But other times if I stopped, I didn't really care because I was still walking a minimum 10K a day, right? So when I set that goal of 10K a day, some days I know I'm just not going to hit it, but I'm not upset about it as long as I've clocked the 300 for the month. And so last month I was a little bit mad at myself because I really, if I'd just gone a couple of extra days with getting over the 10K. I would have cracked the 400 kilometers for the month, but I did pretty close at 386. And since moving back to the island here, because my e-bike had been in storage for the sort of 18, not 18 months, but yeah, 15, 16 months that I lived in the city. And so 4 or 5 times a week, I just jump on that. I don't use power. All right. It's about a 35 kg bike. It's heavy, looks like a cafe racer motorbike. And the roads here aren't really roads. I mean, on the island, they're rock and gravel and they're repairing them all. So they're even worse, but I'll do, minimum 6 or 7 miles per session, sometimes more, in 7th gear, the hardest gear. And I just ride. So it burns a lot of calories. And so I can still eat pretty much whatever I want, although I cook healthy, generally 5 times a week, or if I go out, I'm eating healthy for the most part. But if I do want a slice of cheesecake, I'll have a slice of cheesecake, but it's just been that effect. And it's nice to feel so much more alive, more clarity, sharpness, stamina, you name it, all of that stuff, as well as, got to pull the bout in another notch, right? Oh, there's another notch gone, and it's a good feeling, it's just now the large size t-shirts, most of them are swamping on me. So, I've gone from extra large, and some of those were tight, to now I'm going to need mediums. So, that's a good problem to have. But I'd set my original goal when I was, well, in kilos, 101.9 or 224.8 pounds at 84 kilograms. And I smashed through that last week to be 181.3 or just over 82 kgs. And now I've readjusted that. I'm stretching my own goal to get it down to about basically 170 pounds, which is 77. And then I'll just start on the building the muscle back up. But what's been interesting with the whole progress is everything's been going down the way it should be, and the things that should be going up, like muscle mass, water percentage, bone density, up. So I feel good.
Amazing.
And I'm no longer, rarely do I need a siesta in the afternoon.
I enjoy a siesta in the afternoon.
I do. I might have one today because of the, not quite the normal amount of sleep. And, I might have 20 minutes later, but I'll still go and do the 6K on the beach in the wet sand and jump on the bike before it gets dark. So that's really, it's just lifestyle change. And for me, the intermittent fasting works. It suits my lifestyle more than some people. And then next month, or in a few weeks, I'm off to Thailand and via Italy, and I'm going to be there for about 6 weeks. You know what? On the way over in the travel, I'm going to enjoy the lounges in the business class lounges and enjoy good food. And then when I get to Thailand after a few days, I'll be back on the IM. But here's what's interesting is because it is a lifestyle and it's easy to flip back onto, if I put on a few pounds during a 4-6 week trip, it comes off usually in the first week. So that's pretty much it. It was just, and what I found for my clients is that it's just, I'm so more in tune and sharper. So they're getting even more than the best from me. They're getting, a shitload, which is enjoyable because they're getting results.
Love it. I can see a reflection behind you there of what looks like white sand beach in some kind of a lagoon type situations. Am I correct?
Well, the beach is over that way, but this is one of the bays on this island where I live. So it's a Caribbean there. This property is built about 80% into the Caribbean Ocean.
Mm-hmm. So you're over the water.
It's built in the water. Yeah, it's
built,
okay. Built above the water. And there's land at the front part, but then when I get to pretty much the start of the building, that's all piled into the ocean.
How'd you put yourself in a position to be living there?
Well, I moved back here. I was living here for about the first 18 months in a different location. And then I moved to the city for business and moved back. I mean, I decided years ago that I wanted to get a permanent residency somewhere else outside of Australia, and I achieved that almost 3 years ago. And when I decided to move back to the island, it was just this property came up, and I came and had a look at it, and just signed the paperwork. You know, like it's a massive, it's 180 odd square meter, 2-bed, 2-bathroom, both king size beds, you know, massive robes, big jacuzzi, even a urinal in the main bathroom, which is a cracker. But, you know, I wasn't so sure about that to begin with, but it is great. You know, I've got
Saves a lot of time, I'm sure.
it does, and saves on water. You know, it's got a massive double, you know, jacuzzi, headrest each end, seat in the middle. It's almost more like a mini pool, you know, but you know, it was just became available. I was like, you know what, I'll come and look at it. I was coming over on a trip to the island anyway, and signed for it, and made the move. And I'm very happy that I did, you know.
I'm talking a little bit more here, sort of philosophically, because you, at some point in your life, was working a very straight, buttoned up kind of career in banking. And nowadays, you're sitting on some tropical island, covered in tattoos. You travel, the amount of holidays you just talked about, I forget all the places you went to. You travel about 3, 4, 5 months of the year and
About
just live the
five
life
months,
of Riley. So,
about 5 months of the year. And the reason I didn't do any more when I got back 1 October last year was because, well, I had my mastermind people coming in. I was a little bit jaded from travel, actually. It had been a lot. So, but this year is going to at least be 5 months as well. So, yeah, I mean, actually, yesterday's mastermind call was sort of covering a little bit about sort of, you know, reflection and that type of thing. But yeah, I was a banker. You know, I left school when I was 14 years and 8 months. I had a junior high school certificate. Banking was my third job, and I was only 16 at the time, or 16 and a half. You know, I did work for what in Australia was the public service. It's probably the civil service, like a government job in the UK. And, you know, when I first went to go to the location they'd sent me, I was 4'11", about 6 stone, ring and wet, hair to here, hair to here. And this guy's like, "Hey boy, you can't come in here." I was like, "Yeah, but I work here." You know, I was like, "No, you don't." I was like, "No, I do. Here's my letter." Right. And so I started there, and then a year later, I went into an apprenticeship program in the Australian Air Force, which was something at the time they offered between 15 and 17. And then at the ripe old age of 16, I got into banking. So, I mean, when you look back, there's no way on this earth that I could imagine that I'd be sitting here where I am now, let alone even when I made the change from a banking career, which was 20 years over 2 banks and 5 years as a commercial finance broker, broking deals between the banks. That, you know, when I chose to get into copywriting in 2001, even then I had no inkling that I would want to live this international lifestyle. And I simply just simply is probably not quite the right word, but to me, looking back on it, it did seem quite simple. Once I made that decision that that's what I wanted, I set in motion whatever it took to make it happen. You know, and to be able to, and obviously, you know, the advancements with the internet and Zoom now, Skype beforehand, it just meant that I could be anywhere with a good internet connection and be able to do my mentoring calls at the time, or any sort of coaching, consulting calls for business owners, etc. And so that just became lifestyle.
And you were active as a copywriter for many years. Do you still actively write copy, or do you focus on mentorship these days?
No, I actually don't do either. I stopped writing for clients for the most part, actually around 2012-ish area. I sort of pulled back. I took on less clients, but charged more. And then over the years since then, I've done a few projects personally, but I prefer to take the projects on and then just copy chief those for former copywriting mentees that I've helped train. You know, helps them, helps me. And I've always been very upfront with a client that you can't hire me. even though you might get tagged or they want to hire you. And I'll just say, well, the fee's going to be ridiculous to the point, even if you want to pay it, I still might not want to do it. But I'll quote them a fee. I tell them exactly how it's going to work. I'll choose who I think is the right copywriter for your particular project. I will pay them. I will oversee the project. I will fine tune it. It's got my guarantee on it. This is how it works. And you know what? They don't have a problem with it. And so, you know, that's just the way I've done it. And right now, it's been this way for a while, apart from the odd, you know, one-off session for a former client. I don't even do the mentoring anymore, one-to-one. Right. I have the mastermind, which includes group mentoring, where they'll get 40 to 44 weekly calls a year, and then we meet 3 times a year. But I can't even see myself in the foreseeable future getting back into one-on-one mentoring, because it's still very time consuming and you do get results for your clients, but it's not how I want to be spending my time on my week. I want to leverage it in other ways. You know, I might get more into some sort of consulting / partnership type scenarios where, you know, instead of paying me the fee, we just work out a percentage split. They make money, I make money. And, you know, maybe there's a small retainer up front, but, you know, the model of paying high retainer fees per month, you know, a lot of, I believe a lot of potential clients just want to run a mile from that. You know, I've done 1 or 2 fractional CMO roles, et cetera, but that's still a big chunk of change for a client to pay. And then there's still a lot of work on your side. So you know, I focus more on my office training, my silent sales formula, and, you know, choosing the right people to come into my Chess Master Family Mastermind, and as well as doing the odd events. You know, that's really it. And that's generally good enough to allow me to live the lifestyle that I want to live.
Nice. It's one of the things I think about you that stands out is that you have sort of decided first, this is the lifestyle I want, and then you've cut the things you do, sort of set of things you do to actually create that, rather than just focusing on get as much money as possible. And then what happens to a lot of people when they go that way is they end up hating their lives as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when I was obviously early on and young and keen and, you know, banging out good results, but it was just like burning the midnight oil and getting burnout. And then it got to a point where I just, and I don't believe any copywriter can actually do this, that you're just doing, especially big project after big project after big project. You sooner or later you're going to have to take a break, because, you know, you might hit that absolute burnout. And one of the things on the to-do list for a little bit later this year is to license a lot of my IP. Right, but be strategic who I license it to. In other words, I've got many well-proven 2-page letters which generate leads over at least 8, 9 industries that I've got a lot of success in. So if I find the right people, I can license that 1 2-page letter to that body, and then get paid per amount per member they have. Right, that's where the money is. Rather than sit there constantly having to write for clients or, you know, do the one-to-one stuff. Let somebody else do that. You know,
When it comes to those kinds of deals where you're thinking about licensing work or selling IP or getting into partnerships, and I know, you know, you're somebody who's been in the world of commercial banking, so you understood even before you got into copywriting, deal making at a level that probably most people don't have access to in this industry. But right. I see this as an issue for a lot of copywriters I speak to, where they want to do deals that are just not a straight fee, where they might get some to basically take part in the performance of the work they deliver, but they don't know how to negotiate it. They don't even know how to assess whether it's viable. How do you look at a client or look at a project and know, actually, yeah, this makes more sense for me to work a partnership rather than a straight fee?
That hasn't come about easy because we all know this, whether it's copywriters or consulting, whatever, right? Is that the risk is, what if they rip me off, right? What if they don't cough up? And it's always that risk, right? But I think it's got to come down to your initial vetting process in the beginning, before you even waste a lot of time. Like, rarely will I even get on a call with somebody now. I'm definitely well into Travis Sago's model, and some of Kevin Nation's model from the former mentoring with Kevin. And so these days, you can assess pretty quickly whether someone's a good fit or not based on one or two questions in a DM. So, if that sort of goes well, then I might explore. And if push comes to shove and need be, after a lot of vetting, that I've decided, okay, I would like to work with you. I don't beg for clients. Maybe you want to work with me and I don't want to work with you. And I'm going to be honest about that and say, we're not a good fit. But if I think it's a good fit, then I look at certain things. And one of the things that I did learn from Travis specifically, and one of his latest things that I've been into, is just doing contracts for 12 months. Right. And, he spoke on one of his videos not that long ago that I was watching, where, he licensed basically an email or two, or a sales letter on a licensing deal rather than a fee. So he's making more money from it.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas most of us in that copywriting world are trying to get that fee, maybe a percentage, which, unless you can really track it, you could get shafted. But if you do your vetting process and look under different rocks, what I find is that a majority of people either in the copywriting space or want to get into the copywriting space are going after pretty much the same audience. Oh, I want to help coaches and consultants. I want to do this, I want to do that. There's much lower hanging fruit out there if you apply the copywriting and marketing chops that you have or that you're going to acquire, and look at the low hanging fruit where they're not as clued up about marketing or copywriting as you, even though they might be turning over $3, $4, $5, $10 million or more. Right. So I was, Caleb Haddad is, right?
I do. A very interesting man, an Irishman.
He is. He's a good Irishman. He definitely can't say his thirds for sure. We took the piss out of him so much at Drayton Bird's event, especially Halbert and Carlton and the rest of us, because he couldn't say his 30 turds. But I mean, Caleb's an exceptionally smart guy. He's come a long way since being a Halbert protege. But I flew to Miami a few years ago during Rona I needed to get to Europe for business, and I needed the COVID jab, whether I liked it or not, or I didn't go. So I flew in from Panama for the 2-in-1, the Johnson & Johnson. Mm-hmm. Caleb in Miami, and it's like, oh, damn, man, it's like, I wish you'd give me more notice, because it's the wife's birthday. We're going away for a few days, but if you're going to be still in town, we can have dinner, before you fly out. And so you had to stay 2 weeks before, I could fly into Europe. So I went to stay with friends in Pittsburgh, and specifically flew, in other words, I paid flight and accommodation to fly from Pittsburgh just to have dinner with Caleb. Why? Because it's worth every penny of that investment. So, we go for dinner, and, he said something to me, which is really where the chess masters came into it. He said, you and I are playing schoolyard marbles. We're chess masters. It's about time we started acting like a chess master. And it really stung. It really kicked me right in the nads, because he was so spot on. And I was like, well, you're doing much better than me. But if you're thinking that, but what he brought up was a valid point. At the time, he'd had an introduction to a potential client who'd turned over 60 million gross the previous year, selling inkjet printers on Amazon. All right. The guy didn't even know what Active Campaign was or anything like that. He had nothing in an ESP. He had 1 million+ email lists and thought that you would have to get a person or a team of people to send one email at a time. All right. And I just go straight into Toecracker, mate. I was like, oh, you can do this, this, and this. And he goes, fucking exactly what I'm talking about. In a matter of what, 10 seconds or whatever it was, there's 4 ideas you could double his business next year. You know, but that really hit me as to, here's someone grossing, you know, 60 million. It doesn't know some of the basics that most of us know way more information about and could easily help them. That's what I mean by a lot of people looking under the wrong rocks in the wrong areas.
Yeah, I hear you. It's something I've been working with recently, and they're selling into a market that a lot of people want to sell into in webinars. And it's like constantly having to think of what's a new hook, what's a new angle, what's a new mechanism, because the audience gets jaded so fast. There's so much competition. There's a turnover of ideas. Whereas in other spaces, which are less interesting to the internet marketing crowd, the pace of innovation is a lot slower.
Yes, and you can charge them a lot more and do bugger all work, leveraging your time. Tramco, work less, make more, you know? And that's what I love about this. And obviously, you know, there's, you know, I mean, there's things that I share with my higher paying clients for them to be implementing some of this stuff. And, you know, it's just, you know, that dinner with Caleb was a real game changer for me. Stung me big time, the way it was meant to sting me, not intentional or like for me, but it's like, wow, you really got me there, because it made me think a lot. That, you know, I'm doing okay, but I want to do better. And then, you know, I was still wrapping up a business partnership. You know, I was in a business partnership then, and I've since wrapped that up. So it's allowed me to just be working and focus on my own things. And there's just so much opportunity out there. You know, it's no different when I first got into copy. And I think you might know this, but, you know, I did charge my first ever client 10,000 Aussie dollars. I was in Australia at the time, which is, I think, sort of unusual for most people when they get into copywriting to charge a 5-figure fee the very first time with no runs on the board, right? No credentials, no proof. But, you know, I backed myself, and which is something I've always done. I've always backed myself. Right, I'll take what I consider a calculated risk. Sometimes it's slightly higher than normal, but I back my ability to be able to work it out. Even if I've got to reverse engineer something, I'll be able to work it out. And I've always sort of done that, I think, for as long as I can remember. And even, you know, in high school. So whilst I finished junior high school at 14 years and 8 months, I also only did 6 years of year 8, the first year of high school in my state. And that was just the exams. I hadn't done any of the actual classes, but just went straight from year 7, coming back from Malaysia in 1977, to the last 6 weeks of school doing the exams on a bet I made with the principal that if I passed the exams, he put me into year 9. If I didn't, I went back and repeated year 8. Because I was in Australia. I'm not sure if it's the same now or different, but when I was in, you know, primary school, elementary school for North Americans, the primary school was year 1 to 7, and high school was junior 8, 9, and 10, and senior 11 and 12. Well, my father gets posted to Malaysia. We go up there in April 1975, and I'd only turned 11 a few weeks before. Well, they were under a different state schooling system. Primary school 1 to 6, high school 6 to 12. So I go to the school with my parents and the principal, and he's like, he's got to go and do year 5. I can't have him going into high school at 11 because I wouldn't have even been 12 at the time when I first started high school. It's just a no-no. So I was just bored. I sat there twiddling my thumbs for year 5. They'd already done it. Year 6 was pretty much the same. I'd done a good chunk of it the previous year. And then I went into high school, year 7. And we go back in the October 1977. And I say to my parents, I'm going to high school. Yeah, but it's year 8. I go, let's meet the principal. And again, I was this long-haired kid then, long hair, short, football socks pulled up to the knees, sort of like Paul Hogan back in the day, right? Felt stubby rugby shorts on. And it was reversed. It's like, no, even though his first year of high school, he hasn't done year 8. He's got to go back to the primary school and finish it there, and then he can start year 8 next year. And my parents were agreeing, and I was just like, I didn't even know where this came from. And I was like, excuse me, can I say something? And he called me Sonny. Sure, Sonny. And I just made him a bet. I said, I bet you that if you put me into year 8, I can pass the exams enough to go straight into year 9. And if I don't, then I'll gladly go and do all of year 8 next year. My parents were just absolutely gobsmacked as to where this came from. And it's something about it must have inspired him. And he just looked at my parents and said, do you think he can do it? And they said, if he says he will, he will. And he's like, you've got a deal, Sonny. And that was it. So it's been there for a while, but I just back in my ability. Back when I got into copywriting and I pulled the 25K trigger on the Dan Kennedy non-exclusive resale rights at the time. I mean, there's nothing like you've got today with social media, being able to access your heroes, your gurus or whatever. I mean, the only way I could access Dan Kennedy back then was send a fax, and that would only be for like a copy critique. There was none of that, right? And so it was just, you had to work it out yourself. Right. Whereas these days it's a lot easier. You can build a relationship with somebody online that's got perceived to have a much bigger name than you or been around the block a long time, and they'll happily engage with you and give you advice.
Mm-hmm.
I do it to people that are, starting out myself, so it's definitely, I think, in some ways, a lot easier. And in other ways, it could be difficult because they're not forced to think.
I was going to say it's easier in the sense that there's more access, but it's harder in the sense that when you were talking about Dan Kennedy, at that time, it was bloody well clear that Dan Kennedy was the guy, right? Whereas now there's 10 different guys, all who claim to be of the same status as Dan Kennedy, and most of them probably aren't.
Yes.
Now, we don't want to get into a negative conversation, so we'll move on positive topics.
The rabbit hole of A-list copywriters, but
we won't have that one today. Your thoughts on this are well known.
That's a whole different topic. But yeah, you're right. And so for me, when I first started, of course, I had all of, I bought the master kit, so it took about 2 weeks to get it. And I just devoured the information. And, when I did that first ever copywriting project, I just reverse engineered some of Dan's letters, which came with the license, which I could use to sell his products, and just reverse engineered one and then put it together, hoping like hell it would work. Fortunately, it did. But then, I just focused on studying Kennedy style because it resonated with me, and Gary Halbert because Halbert style resonated with me. And then a little bit later, it was Ted Nicholas and then obviously Drayton. But I just focused on 2. The style that more suited who I was about.
What I wanted to talk about next was actually your ability to connect with a lot of these very well-known names in the industry. Because you just mentioned having dinner with Caleb O'Dowd, who I think anyone who's listening to this, who's clued in, will know who he is, because he's kind of a bit of a low-key legend in the industry. But then I was at your event last year, and you had people like Pauline Longden there, you had Paris Lampropoulos there, you had Stan Dahl there. And you've got connections with a lot of these people who have been very well established in the business for a long time. So how did you get about putting yourself in the position to build all those relationships?
Yeah, good question. Well, let's wind even right back to 2004. Okay. So in Australia, you had a few well-known names in terms of Australians at the time. And I decided to attend my first ever online event. My acronym for it is Wankers in Suits, but the World Internet Summit. And I didn't know anything about. I was scared of online. I was like, I got to get into the real world and actually establish some sort of email list and online presence. So I went to this event, and I'm just blown away, as well as like a deer caught in the headlights. Like, what's front page? What's pay per click? I had no idea. And one of the promoters at the time, Brett McFall, he invited me to speak at two of his 3 events in Australia. He called his advertising boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
And they're one-day events. He held one in Sydney, one in Brisbane, one in Melbourne. And so he invited me to speak in Brisbane, along with David Kavanagh, who was one of the speakers at the event as well, the World Internet Summit. And then in Melbourne, this is where I met Ed Dale. I literally went online, and in no time, Gary Halbert was my 36th ever subscriber. Right. And you see No Sex Gary at AOL subscribe, it certainly was a good feeling, right? And then he would just start the banter between him and I. So I made some good connections there. And also I made a promise to myself. And I went to the promoters of that event. Now, bear in mind, I had nothing online apart from an ugly-ass, dung-in cyberspace business card-looking website that I'd had done. And I said, hey guys, I want to speak at your next event. And they were like, well, you got to prove yourself. And I was like, great. When's it going to be? About a year's time. I said, but we picked the speakers end of October, beginning of November. So this was sort of end of February. You got to pull finger. And so I made it happen, right? And that just sort of started to get key introductions. I spoke at that event, met some other sort of names at the time, Stephen Pearce, Marlon Sanders. And then it was a mate of mine who was at that event. He bought Stephen Pearce's product, which included one of his events in Ann Arbor, Michigan in mid-July, July 2005. And it's like, it comes with a spare ticket. Do you want to come? I was like, sure. Going to that event, and then Stephen's like, why didn't you tell us you were coming? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I didn't even know you knew who I was, even though we spoke on the same stage, right? And so that started a lot of my US connections. But there was one step before that. Mal Emery, who was the big name in Australia at the time, selling, sort of thought of himself, or probably still thinks of himself as the Dan Kennedy of Australia. I mean, Mal's a good guy, knows his shit, but he put on these big events. And he also asked me to speak at that event in I think October that year. He had Matt Fury, Yannick Silver,
Mm-hmm.
Bill Glazer, Dan Kennedy's partner at the time, and a guy called Jim Edwards. And Fury and I just got on like a house on fire right from the get-go. Because I just treated him like normal. We were as thick as thieves. And he was like, hey, you want to speak at my event next, in 2005? Sure. Well, who wouldn't want to speak at a Fury event, right, to his people? And so it just sort of came from there. But I mean, I'm myself. WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. I'm no different if I meet someone who's, literally way above me or perceived to be way above me. I'll talk to the speakers and the attendees the same as I would speak to anybody in a bar. And that sort of helped me, I think, with a lot of relationships and getting introductions and getting invited to speak at other events. And then with the likes of Carlton, I first met John. Obviously, I knew who he was. I didn't know that he knew who I was. But I went to the Gary Halbert Memorial event in 2017 at the Bellagio, and John and I were obviously Facebook connected, but I was literally going to the pisser as John's walking in. He's like, "G'day, Toecracker." I was like, "Oh, you know who I am." It's like, "Yeah, of course I do." And so we just started to talk. Ed Dale was there. You got Ben Simpkin, Caleb, and Caleb and I, we knew of each other before then, but that's how we really cemented our relationship, was being at that event. Same as with Bond Halbert, and Mike Morgan was there, and we were just talking. We were talking, one of the events one night, or after one of the events at a dinner. I was like, "Oh, I'm thinking of doing this event for Drayton Bird." And in Poland, right? Now, Carlton had never spoken outside of the US. Most of them hadn't. Right. And they were like, "Yeah, we'll come and speak." Right. I don't really know why, other than I think just being myself. Right. And then it was just, once I pulled the trigger on it, they were all in, every single one of them. Obviously, Stan is John's partner. And then Paris was, I met Paris for the first time at Copy Chief Live in 2019. Pauline made the introduction because I was her first mentor, and at the time he was her last mentor. Right. But whilst we were connected, there was no real relationship other than that actual meeting at the time. The real relationship came from being in Kevin Nation's initial 5K offer, and then being in his mastermind, where we were just like, it's me sitting here and then him there beside each other all the time, hang out all day, pretty much all night, unless he's going on his Tinder dates. All right. And we just built, a rapport, and obviously a lot of respect for him. He seemed to have respect for me. So when I just broached him on the subject, which would be July 2022, because my last event kept getting delayed by Corona, but I knew it was definitely on this time. I was just like, "Hey, Matt Fury's decided to pull out from speaking. He was going to do 2 slots, specific one for on VIP day and another one. Would you like to speak?" And I was like, "Yep, sure. Okay." That was it. All right. And then I was able to get Paris a speaking slot at Drayton's Final Fling. Right. When Drayton came to speak at my event again, when he was coming back to my event after initially having his 83rd birthday event, he was just coming back as my guest. He had no intention of speaking, but I have a way of blackmailing him, bribery, and WhatsApp chats, in a joking way. But of course, he was happy to speak. He got to see Paris and how good Paris is. I mean, you were there, and so I was like, "You got room for one more?" And Drayton's like, "Well, yeah, I can fit Paris in." And Paris did. Paris literally flew over for a couple of days and then flew back because he had his own event on.
Now, you spoke about 2 things. One is actually the value of going to other people's events, and then also your own events. So specifically talking about your events, how have you found that going from being an attendee to being the host has actually affected your career development and elevated your status?
Good question, because I spoke at a lot of events on a speaking circuit, literally from 2004 until about 2011. Right. So I got to speak at a lot of events and meet a lot of cool people, both as people in the room and other speakers and relationships, right? Doing that, and when I did that event, that was my first multi-speaker event. I'd never done one before, right? But I'd been at enough train wrecks of other people's multi-speaker events, right, to understand what I wasn't going to accept, right? And actually, the recordings of the Poland event are just about the final edits are being done, and then transcribed. So you'll have all those. But I was listening to Stan's testimonial as watching him, and he was just basically saying, Toecracker does not let any of the speakers leave. They have to commit to going there delivering content, and they can't just skive off, right? So I mean, obviously you're at this one or the last one, and you know yourself. I mean, I keep a tight ship. Everyone's back in the room on time, right? There's a lot of fun. I make sure the emphasis on build relationships, right? Rapport with others, do side deals together, right? Yeah, if you want to buy the speaker stuff, they're going to make you an offer, but there's no long-winded half an hour wind-up pitch fest, right? I think my offer was about 3 minutes, maybe 4, all right? And people couldn't even fill out their credit card details on my form, right? It was just, if you're in, let me know, we'll sort the rest out later. But for me, it's very important that every person who comes to my event as the host, right, has an amazing experience from the moment they get to the pre-event function, or, you know, even the day before the event where there's other people, and making sure they're all introduced to each other. And if I think there's already some sort of key connection to make, I'll make it. That's really what my events are about. Yes, I want you to be able to learn things from each speaker, myself included. Implement those. If you feel the need to invest in yourself and get into something else, by all means. If you don't, there's no bad judgment or any judgment other than I appreciate you coming and being at my event. If I've done the right thing and you've had an amazing time and got the value, you'll want to come to the next one, right? Which is a bigger challenge here in Panama to get them to work out what you want in the contract, but hopefully I'll sort that out in the next couple of weeks in the city, and they'll announce the next dates. But the thing is, when I held the first one, which, you know, and I busted my shoulder 2 weeks before, so I got 3 fractures and a forward dislocation, but the show must go on, right? You just got to deal with it. This time I was like, I set the bar high for my first one, because I had 2 big events at Drayton's 83rd birthday party and then the VIP party. That I need to raise the bar for myself to make the standard even better than before. And then now that I've had the one that you attended, I plan to raise it even more. Which, you know, I know I can do, but, you know, it's definitely got the cogs turning as to how I can make it an even more better experience, so that this becomes something that's just on the map. And prior to going to the event, because of the stress of the corona delays over 3 years and having to change the date literally every 6 months over that period, I had a lot of refunds that was just because of the dates don't work. Right, 14 of them, at 14 VIPs at $4,000 actually, right?
Wow. Yes.
But I still hit the VIP numbers, right? When you came to the event, and, you know, it was interesting for me, because I was at the point literally a few weeks before I was due to fly over from Panama to Poland if I would do another event, right? Because it was quite stressful. And Amit Saneja said something to me on a private call with him when I told him that. And he's like, from what I understand because he was a Halbert protege as well, from Carlton, from Stan, from Bond, from Caleb. And it's like, you can really brand this as the relationship type building event to be at, knowing there's, you know, using my own term, no pelicans are going to be there. Right. And so I was able to separate the stress from the corona side of it to go, you know what, this is just normal event stress now. I can deal with that all day long. Right. So that's what I plan to do. I'm just in 2 minds now, whether it's going to be at the end of this year sometime, or I wrap it into my 60th birthday next year, which is in March. Right. Still deciding. But, you know, working out the angle of the next one is like, how can I make it even more interesting for new people, but also for people who have been to the previous one or both events. All right, so it's the ultimate experience. I want people to have an experience that just blows them away, unlike any event they might have ever been to. And if I keep raising the bar myself, doing things better and, you know, improving on how I run an event, things that I do, it's a better user experience, it's not going to be difficult to fill the event out at the small capacity of numbers that I want every year.
Oh, well, just like speaking from personal experience, having been at that event, it was kind of like getting invited to somebody's house for the weekend. You know, like you've invited a bunch of friends around because everyone was made to feel very welcome. Everything was very relaxed and low key. And then by the last day, like I remember the first day we come in, like Paris Lampropoulos was there, and he was there as your, I think, kind of your headline speaker for the event.
Yep.
And he didn't really say much the first day. You could see he was like, I think, just kind of preparing himself to speak. And he didn't really say much. And then he gave his talk. And on the day he gave his talk, I remember he was like, it took him, you know, he obviously had put a lot of preparation. And when he came in to give that talk, he let it out of him that had obviously been building up for a few days of forward planning. But once he'd given that talk that evening, when everyone was going to have a get together, which he did at a very beautiful location out of town at the beach, all the pressure was off him. And then he was just chatting and having fun and getting along with all the other guests. And there was a mix of all the speakers and guests on the last evening. And it just, again, felt like a kind of weekend get together at somebody's house. Obviously, in a very kind of high standard, sort of classy way, not just a
Yeah.
few tinnies on your mate's back porch, but but like just that nice informal feeling of getting a bunch of people around, and it doesn't really matter who's who, everyone's just there to have a good time.
Yeah, I appreciate the observation. You know, or Paris is, you know, I mean, he's sort of quite introverted, same as Carlton, right? They'll openly admit that. But, you know, and he prepares, right? I mean, you know, as you know, I jokingly called him Paris Primadopoulos more than once, even when I introduced him at Drayton's final flick, I introduced him as that and he just laughed, right? But he's very serious about what he does and make sure is, you know, what he presents is you know, top shelf. And that's, you know, from a promoter's point of view, that's a dream that you, I mean, obviously knew that he would deliver, but I mean, you want to be able to vet your speakers, right? And let them know, in my case, this is what I expect. If you're not able to deliver on that, tell me now and I'll find somebody else, because I've got a laundry list of people who want to speak at my events. All right, which is a good problem to have. I have quite a long laundry list as well of people who generally couldn't go to the last one. Just waiting to go, you got the dates, we're ready to pull trigger. Now, here's what's interesting. I don't even think at this stage I'm going to do a sales letter for my next event. What do you think I'm going to try to get the initial bunch of people signed up?
Well, you've already got a list of people, you know, I mean, a big mailing list of people who you know are interested, who've already been there. I'm guessing some kind
Yeah.
of referral-based strategy, maybe?
Google Doc.
Okay, simple.
Google Doc. And, you know, I'm sort of slowly vetting people right now because the theme for the next one is going to be goats versus underdogs. Right. There are a lot of goats out there and there are a lot of underdog people that people have really never heard of that are doing really, really big things and have a lot to deliver. So, and pretty much I've mentioned that to a few people, the idea, and they're like, you know, big Survivor fans. So it's like, you know, imagine having like a Matt Basic on email and then somebody else that people don't really know about, but's doing big numbers, you know, two different perspectives. So I'm just mulling the idea, right? But, you know, and what I learned from even the first event, between the first and the second, because I did have a few speakers last minute, literally have to pull out. Unfortunately, Adam Urbanski moved mountains to come and speak at my event as well.
That's right, you did.
But I'm just going to keep the numbers to around that sort of 7 speakers plus myself. Right. And if you'll notice if you recall on the last day, on VIP day, right, where it wasn't being recorded, it was just Harris doing a private talk for the VIPs, was that there was supposed to be some more hot seats in the morning. But when I got there, and Paris was, you know, still working, still fine tuning his offer and stuff like that and getting exactly clear, and he said what he was going to talk about. So he did come on late, which was fine because we, you know, had the venue up until lunchtime. Was that I just noticed everybody was still there, you know, bright and cheery and early, enjoying the morning food and the coffees and teas and the whatevers. And I was just like, hey guys, plan to do some hot seats, but if you just want to network, build on relationships, they're like, yes, please. So that's all I did. Just let people network with each other. And what's been interesting since the event, and only as recently as just prior to Christmas, where I'm, I still touch base with people. Obviously, you're a client as well from being at the event, and you did join one of my other offers, but just touching base with people, seeing how they're doing, how things are going since the event, because I'm generally interested in finding out, well, hey, I went with Pauline's office. Like, yeah, I know. I hired so-and-so to do this for me, right? And I got amazing results. That's what I want to hear. Where people are doing side deals with each other and building on, what good future potential long-term relationships.
Awesome. So when is that next event going to happen, Trevor? Got a date ready yet?
Either first week of November, because you just need a good 6 months, or I'll do it before my 60th next year and wrap the VIP party into my 60th.
Awesome.
So I'm not sure yet. The issue I have here is, even though you explain what you need, like they want me to guarantee 60 hotel rooms, and I'm saying, and pay the first night's accommodation on those and everything else. And I'm like, but I don't need 60 rooms. Most people aren't going to stay here. What part of me only needing 8 rooms do you not understand? So whenever I get the proposals, it's just, if they ever get back to you, they have an issue here in Panama of not responding to your email. So I've got to go to the city in the next week or two before I fly to Milan and then on to Thailand, where I need to see my dentist, I need to see my bank manager, and I'll hopefully sort the hotel out in person, because I know the general manager down. They seem to understand it, but then the event manager's like, what do you need again? I was like, this is what I need. Then I get the pricing. The actual event pricing is great, right, for the cocktail party and everything else. But I was like, I don't need these 60 rooms. So once I sort that, I'll know. But I would say first week of November, maybe the last couple of days of October-ish, or it's going to be early next year.
I'm going to put a link in this video description to get people on your mailing list. So people who want to attend that event can find out about us. I got one more question for you before we wrap up today.
Okay.
Why are you wearing 2 watches?
The answer I give everybody, because I fucking can. This is the watch, and yes, this is an actual watch, but this is my tracker.
Okay.
I'd had Polaris, Polar before, like I'd had something else, but this is a Withings, and I just find it tracks everything so much better. My steps, my heart rate, my sleep, including all the REM, interruptions, you name it. It's got very accurate data. And the battery life on this lasts 1 month for a charge.
Oh, that's awesome.
So whilst this is a watch, this dark face, I just don't look at it. But I get asked that question a lot. I just always say, yeah, fingers up, because I can. Right. I just don't, and then I have another watch for, even though this can go to 250 meters, I think I have a different watch if I'm going to go in the water.
Nice.
The Breitling, I'm not putting that in the ocean. The Tag Heuer, I will. So when I go to Thailand, of course, that's going with me. So I can put this in the safe when I leave and got to go in the water and take this one off. That's awesome. All. It was my third thing that I'd got into in terms of tracking, because I don't really want Fitbits and stuff like that. I did a lot of research, and this is what I found was for me, it was the most user-friendly. And I love the long battery life as well for one charge, and it's charges rapido.
Awesome. Trevor, thank you so much for being here and for doing this interview with me. Really appreciate it. And I will share the details, people getting on your list. Any final thoughts before we wrap?
Oh no, I really appreciate, you having me on your call again. I think last time I was in the city, I think, when we did that. So
I was sitting in a caravan in the yard of my car mechanic's workshop, waiting for my car to be fixed.
Yeah. And like it's like for me, I do interviews for certain people, like podcasts or whatever, interview like this, because you just, so for anyone that might be looking to maybe get interviewed by John or by somebody else, be strategic who you get interviewed by, right? Because you never know where that can lead. Like I got an email from this company last week saying, hey, they'd seen my interview I'd done with Maria.
Mm-hmm.
This company is the biggest podcasting company in the planet. They look after pretty much every 500 Inc. podcast, from production, you name it. Right. And it's just like, and I figured it would be pay to play, right? Because I've been invited to be on a few pay to plays, but I ignored the email. I was a bit busy, and then I got a follow-up email on Monday saying, hey, so I said, all right, at least tell me what it's about. I'm potentially interested. And I got the deets yesterday. Now that's potentially, that's some smart podcast to be on when, yeah, I'm going to pay them to play. Not that much, actually, 400 an episode. Like I pay for 8, 3,200 to get on 8 top podcasts. Imagine the audience and reach that I can have from that. Right. Why would I want to be getting on constant free discovery calls that people do and wasting a lot of hours, trying to think whether someone's a good fit? Well, I do that in DM chats, and also strategic on being on someone's podcast, like Shramko's, for example,
Mm-hmm.
where there's they deliver a lot of value. People will seek you out.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. And so that's how I want to wrap it up, because obviously, you've got a certain audience, and I get invited on other stuff and I just don't do it. Well, it's not my cup of tea, not my sort of people. So why would I invest the hour, right, when it's an audience for me that falls on deaf ears? So I won't do it. Right. But, for clients, you're a client, you've got an audience, we're in similar circles. Well, then, of course, for me, it's a pleasure.
One thing I've found with podcasts as well, that when I've paid for coaching or hired people investing money, I've usually gone and sought out podcasts to have a good listen to what they've got to say before I made the decision to give them my credit card.
Yep.
I think a lot of people are like that.
Yeah. When I did my first podcast for Shramko, now I did 2 in 2021. And the first one generated enough to buy my jet ski, which was 27K at the time, let alone the additional business that's come through it, and the additional business that was also bought into the partnership at the time. Right. But, even with that, the new business I picked up from that and the relationships I got from that, and from Shramko's side of it, he had people just implementing the free shit on the podcast and making money from it. That is why, well, in my case, that's why I do it. You impact people whether they invest in you or not. They might invest in your knowledge. They might not necessarily be investing money in you. But if they can invest in your knowledge and actually increase sales in the business, they're going to remember what? You and the person they heard it through. Podcast host, event host, whatever.
Love it. Great note to end on. Thank you so much, Trevor.
All right, mate.
Appreciate
Cheers,
it.
John. See you, buddy. Looks cold there too, by the way.
Got the fire on.